We have with us the one, the only Lou Berger. He is here filling in for David Wright. I mean,
No,
David Gerrold.
Look,
Good
man, I
God.
realize David and I are close, but goddamn, man.
It's the Jim Gerrold show. But
We'll have to have badges made up for the next convention that says I'm not Jim Gerald and he's not. I think Niven and Pornell did that once upon a time.
David Wright and Jim Gerrold. Yeah, you guys can do that.
Yeah.
You know, you could say that and people would know we were talking about two of the more brilliant people.
Yeah, I don't know if brilliant's the right word, but
what I understand from
know.
Jim is David found an unopened bottle of wine this morning. And so he was occupied. He's going to get me for that one, I know. No, David had an issue come up.
If he doesn't want us talking about him, he should have been here.
And Lou Berger, you guys all know him. He has been in a number of our anthologies and has always been worth hearing from. So, Lou, if you were going to be the David Wright character, David Gerrold character this morning, okay, I need you to sit there, think for about 10 minutes while Jim goes on his rant. And
I'm not going to think. How much coffee have you had this morning, jackass? God, it's like being in the Navy again.
Get off my lawn.
That's right.
Get off my lawn. Yeah.
Right. The problem is David moved to, I don't know, Vermont or something now, and he's like all mellow and happy, and he sits out on his porch and drinks coffee and throws bread at ducks all day. And yeah, I liked it better when he was old and mean and grumpy Los Angeles David, but now he's like all happy and grandfatherly and pets his dog all day.
Oh, I mean, okay, we can pick on David then a little bit. I mean, looking at his Facebook page, I love his grandkids. They are the cutest things in the world. Yeah. But it's like looking at my grandmother's Facebook page sometimes where she put all the pictures of her grandkids on there. And it's so cool. It's the only time you ever see the cousins. But anyway, so I understand we're having an election coming up.
What?
Yeah, and we've got...
When that happen?
I don't know, but have you got pre-registered? Are you registered to vote so Matt Getz can count on your vote, Jim?
Oh yeah, I'm registered. We check here in the Panhandle of Florida. We check our registration on a weekly basis because you never know when these jackasses might not try to disenfranchise you. And if you're out there watching, check your registration because you don't want to find out on the morning of.
750,000 voters in North Carolina. I think that was the number I saw.
Something like that. Yeah, that is. That's going to be even tougher now. I hopefully with the hurricane mess, I'll get everything back online. I've got a month to get it back together, but it's pretty grim up there right now, and so see what happens.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to. I'm a little distracted. I'm trying to share your. I forgot to share the link this morning, so I'm busy trying to do that. I'm not looking at the camera. I'm looking at the other screen here. So
it's a crazy world. So
yeah.
Now I went out and bought myself 100 Vote Blue signs, and I put them up all over the place. And what I really like is when I got a real Trumper flying his flags and everything. And I just I get a tiny little 11 by 18 Vote Blue sign sticking in the yard across from him. So he comes out with his morning coffee to admire his Trump sign, and he has to look at it. That's an evil. It's
kind of mean, man.
Oh, I'm sorry. Were you under the impression that liberals were just simply nice, unarmed people?
That's what I've been told.
I've been going on and on my page lately, hammering home the paradox of tolerance. And the paradox of tolerance, for them that don't know it, are in a tolerant society, infinite tolerance always ends up being steamrolled by intolerance. And so the argument for being able to push back against the intolerant, the bigots, the racists, those who would violate the societal contract, is to understand the existence of a societal contract up front. And we all, as a civilization, must live under a societal contract, or we would just eat each other alive like locusts, I guess. So the societal contract states that when you're out in public, you must ensure that your behavior lets other people know that they are safe, that you will help people who are stricken, that you are maintaining the existence of your own being amidst the existence of other equally valid beings, and that when racists and bigots start waving their flags or wearing their red caps stating that there are others who are less than, they are violating the societal contract and must be dealt with swiftly and harshly. And that is the only way for a tolerant society to maintain its status.
Now you got Laura Boebert as your congresswoman. He's
Oh,
got Matt
whoa,
Gaetz.
whoa, 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 man. Yeah, I didn't realize that's where you were living, Lou. Wow, yeah, that's
I'm in Denver.
I do have the advantage of the fact that Gates is never here. The safest place from Matt Gaetz is in Matt Gaetz' district. He's
Yep.
never here. So,
Yep. Yep.
So.
Yes, Karen, even Kamala has a gun. And the fact is, she and Tim Walz both are avid gun owners, and they know how to use them. And yet they manage somehow to not violate the societal contract.
Yeah. That's funny. Like I said, I'm certainly sitting in my office right now. I get this all the time because I write about gun violence. I wrote extensively about it a number of years ago. It's probably one of the things that I'm best known for. And I'm sitting 3 feet from 2 gun safes. I'm a gun owner, but they're like my shop, which is on the other side of this wall behind you here. They're tools. They don't define my existence. I spent most of my life, as most of the followers know, I spent most of my life in the U.S. military. Guns are part of your culture, but they're also highly regulated, highly managed. We don't have a hell of a lot of gun accidents in the military because guns are treated. They're, like I said, if you follow me for any length of time, you'll know that one of the things that I say repeatedly is that there are no accidents with guns, only negligence. And man, I'll tell you what, there is nobody that hates that phrase more. It gives me more shit, sends me more hate mail and death threats than responsible gun owners. They're all about being responsible. They're all about responsibility until they're held responsible. But if you're leaving your gun in your truck at night, which is most of the guns that are stolen around here are stolen out of vehicles at night in this particular area. So if you're leaving an unsecured weapon in your truck at night, you're not a responsible gun owner. If your kid gets your gun and shoots another kid, you're not a responsible gun owner. That's not an accident. It's negligence. And
you're all responsible until you aren't.
Yeah. But anyway, this is I could talk about guns for the next 2 hours and everybody get bored and go home. So that's one of the reasons I stopped talking about it, because it was like my dad was a sailor too, and his phrase was shoveling shit against the tide, and that's really what it feels like in this country. And but there's enormous parallels for this. It's not just guns; it's the entire mentality. Hurricane hit the Gulf Coast, and there's tremendous devastation all the way up in the central part of the United States. You'd have to be a clam living under a rock not to know about this, and so I don't need to belabor the disaster, but I was right on the very edge of it. Living on the Gulf Coast where I do, hurricanes are a fact of life. And so after it passed us by, I had said online on Threads that this is a perfect time to mention the fact that we should be voting for a governor who actually believes in climate science and who spends more time worrying about things like homeowners insurance, which is astronomical in the state of Florida, instead of persecuting librarians. And I think a lot of people in my audience got that, but a hell of a lot of people were mad about it. My God, this is not the time to talk about that. Really? Well, when is the time? Because it's never the time to talk about gun violence when gun violence is
right.
And when it's not happening, which in the United States of America is never nowadays, we don't want to talk about it then because now it doesn't matter. It's the same thing with hurricanes. When there's no hurricane disaster, not time to talk about it. Nobody's interested. And when it is a hurricane disaster and half the country's in ruins, well, that's not the time to talk about it either. And so we continue to ignore this stuff. And again, these are metaphors for much larger things, for much larger problems. That it's a mentality into this ideology that we face every day. Lou, at this point, this is where David just starts talking over top of me and tells me to shut the hell up. So
Nope.
it's your turn, man.
I have, just so you know, Jim, I haven't changed. The Republican Party moved past me, which was what, 10, 15 years ago? And
Yeah, something
I think
like
it was
that.
during
Yeah.
the time of Obama. Was it Obama?
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
have
it was
sent
good.
that essay to multiple people.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was. It's like I said, I grew up in the Republican Party, or my parents were staunch, hardcore Republicans. My dad was the most Republican you've ever met, but old Eisenhower type Republicans. And
Right.
And while he had his issues, as he got older, the problem was as the Republican Party changed around him, because of when my father was growing up in the 1930s, the 1930s and the 1940s, liberals were communists. Now they weren't necessarily communists, but that was, of course, the pervasive mindset. My father grew up and his mentality was shaped by the Red Scare and World War II and the Great Depression and those sorts of things. And so in those
Yep.
days, Republicans were actually the progressives and the forward-thinking people and that sort of thing. And so when the 60s happened, it kind of left my dad a little perplexed, I think. and when the civil rights happened and the ideologies of parties swapped,
Yep.
those were things that people like my father were never able to really adapt to. They'd been Republicans their whole life. And so it was impossible for them to, but then age and kind of set in your ways, it becomes more and more difficult to. And so for my dad, it was very. I wrote that essay about me because it very much happened to me, but it was also true of my father, who really couldn't face the fact or couldn't adapt to the fact that the party that he'd belonged to his entire life had gone from Eisenhower to Sarah Palin.
Yeah.
And it's horrible as I miss him every day, but I'm glad he's not. I'm glad he's not here to see that the Republican, what's left of the Republican Party, embrace Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. That would have broke his heart. I don't think he would have been able to survive that, and it's pretty horrifying. So I think it's true of a lot of people in the country. I run into folks down here all the time that all of you know. I think we've all experienced the. I get it every day. I get it at least once a week now. I used to get it every day. Now I get it about once a week where my neighbors, the Democrats are the ones who founded the Ku Klux Klan. Yeah. That's absolutely true. You won't get any argument from me. But that was 60 years ago, and things have changed since then. And you haven't. That's the problem. You missed 60 years of history. So
Yeah, the Klan was around in the 20s, right?
well, yeah, there's been three. Well, it's longer than that. Originally, the original version of it was founded in the 1870s, but there's been three major iterations of it in the country, and it was dying out when Lyndon Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act in 1964, and all of the Dixiecrats, the people that I'm surrounded by, the ones that followed George Wallace out of the Democratic Party in a raging huff and became independents for about 10 years. That's when you saw a massive resurgence in the Klan. And it'd always been there. It didn't go away, but you saw a massive resurgence in it. You saw favorable videos and, people talking about our culture. And you still see a lot of that down here where I live. And then of course, in the early 1980s, late 1970s, early 1980s, and Lee Atwater's Southern Strategy and the rise of Ronald Reagan, those people were pulled into the Republican Party, and you saw a dramatic shift from those people being Southern Democrats to being the Republican Party of today. And a lot of those folks, that mentality or their descendants morphed into the Tea Party and then into the MAGAs. And you can trace a direct line all the way back if you follow this stuff. And again, like I said, I live submerged in this all the time. And it's funny, I get emails from people who tell me, well, it's not really like that. Well, it really is. And I live in a very small southern town, and downtown, the principal attraction of this little, so this is literally a backwater town, is a railroad museum. And that railroad museum has a waiting room for white people and a waiting room for people who are not white. And that railroad museum, that railroad station was active almost to 1980. I think it closed down in 1979. And there was discrimination, separate waiting rooms and separate bathrooms right up that place closed down. That's how recently it was. I live 15 miles from a town called Jay, which was the last legal sundown town in America. This was the lynching capital of the South. And it wasn't all that damn long. It was in my lifetime, well in the middle of my lifetime. And these are things that people, we don't teach that here in the state of Florida, because it makes people with my skin color sad. And literally, it's against the law. Teachers are not allowed to mention that sort of thing in schools here in public school in the state of Florida.
That is an amazing thing, but I like the fact that you brought up Florida and where you live, because you'll notice this little thing I have up underneath your pictures from, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I know where you're going with it.
Well, no, Jim, you wrote a piece that we are thrilled, Karen Anderson and I, Karen Anderson isn't with us today, or she's watching. Wave hi at the crowd, Karen, from your comment section. But she got Jim to send us in this piece about what's the title of it, Jim?
Antipodes, the opposites.
I don't remember. My brain's dead.
Well, it's called Antipodes, but it's basically it's about the polar opposites of those folks who that I'm surrounded by every day. You have to read it. It's been published before here and there, but this is a revised version that I wrote. Basically, it's observation of life here in the South, and particularly here in Florida District 1, which is Matt Gaetz territory, and very, very much Trump land. And this is a place of antipodes. This is a place of opposites. There are very rich people here, and there are very, very poor people here in this. And the rich people want Donald Trump to be president, and the poor people want Donald Trump to be president. They both think he's going to deliver something to them, but they both think that the things that they want from him, that he's making promises, are diametrically opposed. There's the poor people want the rich people. The poor people are afraid of the rich people, and the rich people are desperately afraid of the poor people. And there's no possible way that any one person could ever satisfy the desires of both of those groups. And yet there they are, with Trump signs in their front yard. And so it's an amazing, it's not amazing is the wrong word. It's a very perplexing contrast. It's not workable. And yet here we are. I mean, but that's probably another essay, is the fact that there's this, again, it's almost a religion. I mean, we call it a cult very often, but it's almost religion. It's almost religious beliefs that these folks have this bizarre faith that Trump is going to deliver some sort of miracle, some loaves and fishes. I mean, if you watch this guy the last couple of days, his speech in Michigan yesterday, holy shit, did you watch that? I'm surprised there's not still blood coming out of my nose. I watched that entire speech, and my head began to 5 minutes in, and I swear to God, I thought I was going to have a stroke listening to this guy. You know, they asked him what he was going to do to ensure that auto manufacturing jobs would stay in America, for example. And the guy went on for 10 minutes about how he'd been man of the year, which is some bizarre thing that he's manufactured in his brain that never happened. And he went on and on and on about it. And the audience is he did answer your question. He's never answered your question. None of the words that he said made any sense whatsoever. And yet the audience is out there clapping and applauding and cheering and laughing for this guy. Because, again, I mean, I'm surrounded by these people. When I talk to them and I say, listen, it doesn't make any sense. And they say, well, yeah, but see, he's so smart that people understand. He's brilliant. That's, you know, and again, this is, you look at this and then you look back at the founding of, pick a religion, whether it's L. Ron Hubbard or Jesus Christ, and you got to wonder if the gibberish coming out of their mouth 2,000 years ago or in the 1970s was any different. I mean, this is stuff that didn't make any sense, but people are like, well, it doesn't make any sense, so he must be, my God, he must be brilliant. This is divine revelation. You get it right here, and there's no way, there's no logic that you can use on people who believe that, because they didn't arrive at that position logically. And that's a mistake I think that Barack Obama made, was trying to deal with these people on a rational basis. They're not rational. So
Yeah.
Anyway, again, I don't want to talk over Lou here. I'm glad to have Lou on, and you're up, buddy.
I am here filling in for David. I'm keeping the seat warm, listening to my favorite people talk.
David talks right every time.
I got nothing of substance to really add, and whatever I do, I put in the chat. But I'm glad to be here. Yeah, I like what Alan was saying about an idiot won't teach, a decent teacher will. Lots of other issues, but a good teacher is still able to teach anything they want. And being a science teacher, Alan, you have that good insight, and that's nice to see.
Yeah, and like I said, I agree with that. And I'm always like I'm sitting here looking at the comments, scrolling down the side, and but again, I mean, I live in enemy territory, and one day it's my dream of one day to move the hell out of here. Right now, I have family obligations. I can't get the hell out of here. But, it's not like my wife and I don't talk about it every day. And this, don't get me wrong, there are wonderful people here. I'm not a fan of the climate. I grew up in cold weather. I spent most of my life in the Arctic, and the heat of the Panhandle is not for me. But I'd like to get the hell out of here. But there are decent folks here, and but on the other side of it, those people are really buried under the and I hate to use these terms. I mean, Hillary Clinton paid the price for calling them deplorables. I think she was too nice. I'm often I'm often Cyril Kornbluth and the Marching Morons and Search the Sky and the Little Black Bag and all the stories that he wrote about a population that glorifies stupidity and ignorance, and then there's this tiny little population of geniuses that are kind of keeping the wheels on before the world blows up. And I very much feel surrounded by that when I'm down here in Florida. And I know I'll get angry emails, people will write me, and I'll get a hate mail or something for it. But again, we literally by basically pick the worst options for the worst reasons. They're not even picking the worst options because they believe that's actually better. I literally speak to neighbors. Well, I don't speak to them too much anymore, but when I do speak to these folks that are very much hardcore Trump folks, and I ask them, I said, look, you can see this. You can see this guy doesn't make any sense. His economic policies will directly harm you. Things like tariffs, that kind of stuff. You are the ones who will pay the price for that. You. And the answer, as long as he makes you mad, I don't care. And that's, it's astounding. My wife and I were talking about this morning. We've elected the mean little bullies from grade school, the ones that the goons that that punched everybody in the mouth, and that the ones that developed early, and they use their bulk to intimidate everybody else. And these people have not changed at all since sixth grade, and um, and now they're in charge of the country. I mean, that's exactly who Trump is. This rich, privileged snot who spent his whole life intimidating people with his wealth and his bulk, and he's never had to be. Again,
Accountable.
I realize I'm starting to change subjects. I'm almost as bad as Trump trying to change subjects here, but this is something. You feel it's a perfect example where they picked on the most vulnerable portion of that population, people that we invited to this country that literally made Springfield better because they could not find people to work in the factories. And we invited these people here that came out of horror and disaster and misery and poverty, and we invited them to our country. And they came here and busted their ass and embraced America. Their children are going to American schools, whatever the hell that is, and they will grow up Americans, a generation of Americans. And this is literally what the Republican Party's claimed they want. You come here legally, you go to school, you become Americans, right? You work hard, you pay your taxes. Well, that's who these people are. But they're the wrong color, or they've got the wrong accent, or they're with Trump. I don't even know if you put, or Vance even put that much effort into it. And the most disgusting part of this is that these people are literally J.D. Vance's constituents. He's the guy that's supposed to be watching out for them, right? And yet, because they're vulnerable, they're an easy target. They're an easy target to pick on, to put down, to be the enemy, to be the victims. And that's exactly what this mentality is, a sixth grade bully of finding the most vulnerable people in the class, the other children, and then victimize for a joke and for your own power. And the guy hasn't changed from sixth grade. It's the same mentality. It's horrible.
They're eating the dogs. They're eating the cats.
They're eating the cats. Did you see that? Did you see that AI meme that's on? I think it was John Fogelstein that I saw this morning at Threads, who had done something about they're using AI to translate Hitler's speeches, and then they show Trump's. They're eating the dogs. They're eating the cats. Is the actual word, and it perfectly lines up. But again, we imagine. I mean, these people claim that we're a Christian nation. If you were a Christian nation, would you not welcome these people? Feed them, clothe them, heal the sick, do unto others as you would have them do unto you? I never see those words on the signs in front of these churches that surround my house here. It's always fire and brimstone and hate and xenophobia. It's never the words of their prophet. And I'm not a Christian, and and I'm not a religious person, but I find it astounding that these people's Bible mentions, I mean, their prophet, the guy that they literally named the religion after, never mentioned gay people not one time. Hypocrisy 100 times. I mean, hypocrisy is called out repeatedly in these people's religious document. And yet here we are with folks that daily engage in this hypocrisy of xenophobia and hate and intolerance, when they were literally commanded by their own religion to be exactly the opposite, to welcome these people, to feed them, to provide for them, to take care of their children. I mean, imagine a nation that did that actually lived up to those values instead of whatever the fuck we are. Excuse my language, but there you go.
The Europeans seem to
have.
Can I
butt in and ask a question of you guys for your thoughts on this?
Well, let Lou finish a minute.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't go, Lou. Go.
I was going to add on to what you were saying, Jim. I grew up in South Florida. I grew up under an educational system that told me about how wonderful Columbus was. They conveniently skipped over the genocide and the murder and the pedophilia and all these things that Columbus did. So it's Here I am. I'm 57 years old, living in Denver, Colorado. Colorado is a purple state, and in Denver, we're pretty blue. I live in a county just south of Denver proper, which is red. It's mostly rural. It's mostly agrarian, but the overflow of people, coming into Denver is so great that this house that I live in, my girlfriend had built for us, and it's what was a cow field 3 years ago, right? And so
Right.
we live. I'm very blue, and so I live in Douglas County, and I register independent. We have codified into our state constitution the right to bodily autonomy for women. We can't. You'd have to change the constitution to overthrow what we've got in place. And ironically, Wyoming did the same thing when COVID came out, and they were concerned about vaccine mandates. They changed their constitution that said we have the individual right to be free to do whatever we want with our bodies. And so when the anti-abortion crowd overthrew Roe v. Wade, Wyoming moved quickly to change their enact anti-abortion laws, and their own Supreme Court, their own state Supreme Court says, "Hey, fellas, got some bad news for you." And
That's
so
right.
abortion's totally legal in Wyoming,
Mm.
which is very red and very sparsely populated. But to dovetail on what you were saying earlier about the modern Christian doesn't seem to be all that Christian. There's been a great outcry over the past few years that congregations don't want to hear the pastors talk about the Sermon on the Mount, which is all about
Right.
loving your fellow man and being helpful and being nice and kind and turn the other cheek and all. They don't want to hear it. That is too woke, and they're mad that the Bible, the Christian Bible, King James Version, is so woke.
Right. Right. Yeah, and it's a part. Like I said, and I've asked this. I've asked this repeatedly here online and in person. I live in a very, very Southern Baptist evangelical Christian town, and in fact, I've been threatened for not being Southern Baptist evangelical. And I drive around, and there are more churches here. I actually grew up in Western Michigan, in Southern Western Michigan, which is Dutch Protestant. And we used to joke in the town. I grew up in a town called Jenison outside of Grand Rapids. And they used to joke that there were more churches there per capita than anywhere else in America. And I always thought that was true because there were these huge Dutch Protestant churches on every Christian Reformed churches on every corner. And then I moved to the South. I'm like, oh, wow, we're not even close. Because there's a Southern Baptist congregation on every corner. Now, look, man, I'm not picking on your religion in as much as, let me put it this way. I will give your religion exactly as much respect as it gives me. So balls in your court. But in recent years, and I'm sure everyone's seen it. There for a long time there were these signboards out in front of these evangelical churches. Now they're giant electronic signs that you could probably see from the space. And but I have never once, not one time, ever seen those signs say, "Feed the hungry, clothe the poor, heal the sick, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Judgments reserved for the Lord." Never seen. I have never, not one time seen the actual words of their prophet on those signs, what you would consider woke. And what I have seen on those signs, and I can go out there right now and look at it because it's Sunday here in the South, and buddy, this is the morning. Every one of those signs is fire and brimstone and damnation and the people that they hate, the people that their God hates. And there's never once any message of tolerance or compassion. It's exactly the opposite. I mean, there ain't no goddamn compassion in the South in church. I can tell you that right now. And it's astounding to me that people who call themselves Christians, who are literally named for this guy, think his words are too woke and won't put him on the sign. That's telling to me. I killed conversation again. Sorry.
No, Bob had a question for.
Yeah, you had a question, Bob.
Oh, hi. I'm sorry. I was so enamored of what you guys say, and it's hard to keep my brain clear with my own thoughts. But it is an interesting world, you know. You talk about the Bible telling us what it's going to be liars that are in the lake of fire, uh, but um, it's okay because I'm sure Trump has got asbestos undies he's going to be buried in. Um, but well, if I was Donald J. Trump and just wanted to believe in the possibility, you know, I would have my death suit be made of asbestos with air conditioning included. But um, the thing I was
I
going to
think
ask
Bill.
you about is we got this fella Walls, who I have just been absolutely impressed at his ability to talk about the important aspects of cleaning out your gutters. Uh, you know, and
Well, you know,
just hey, why not? I mean, he's.
well, what's your question, Bob?
Oh, my question is, what do you think coming up with this debate? You know that he's going to have with Mr. Vance. How much fun do you think he's going to have with Vance's open on mic, hot mic, real mic admission that says, well, you know, basically telling the truth isn't that big a deal. If you got to make up a story to get press coverage, make up the damn story. Um,
Well,
Now that's
yeah,
nothing new, but it was.
I'll let Lou go first there on that one. But yeah, I'll answer your question for you.
I think Vance was an unfortunate choice for Trump and his goals, and I think it's a perfect choice for the rest of us because Vance is so entombed in the cotton batting of his upbringing in a white centric, male centric mindset where he's fine saying what they all say behind closed doors, which we'll lie, we'll say whatever we need to get in power, and he's unashamed, he's unabashedly admitted that of course the things we were saying were lies, but that's what we need to do to get the media to
Right.
pay attention to us. And so when you've got somebody like that on stage with Tim Walz, who has spent his lifetime totally primed to be that white male Christian kind of guy who falls right in line with the propaganda that is generated by our right wing media in a collective. It turns out that this guy's got a heart, that he actually reads the scriptures, that he thinks of people as worthwhile of his respect and time. And so I suspect Tim Walz is going to, turn to Vance and say, brother, who hurt you? How can we help you? Because what's going on with
Right.
you and your party, and you've dragged the whole country all over to the right, even farther than Reagan managed to. And how can we bring you back to common sense and to take care of everybody? It says we the people. E pluribus unum is from many one, not only white straight men. It's from many one. So how can we help you? And I suspect that this will be a lesson to all of us. I hope this is in my fertile writer's brain, that Tim Walz takes this opportunity to create what is effectively a therapy session and says, I believe that America's people deserve respect and kindness and the ability to make a living. And don't you agree, JD? And JD will be enamored with this guy and say, well, sure, but within, hold on, I've got more. And then I think that's what's going to happen. And I hope that's what's going to happen, because the only way I believe that folks who are in the middle end up voting for Kamala and Walz is because he comes across as the sane man on stage on Thursday.
Yeah, I hope so too. Because I tell you what, the idea of somebody who spent his career, a big chunk of his career, dealing with young soldiers and high school kids, ought to be able to handle Vance with half his brain tied behind his back to steal the notion from Rush Limbaugh. But thank you for that thought. I can't get the consequences of Vance just standing up and saying it's okay to tell lies. Uh, it's just like it's
But it is.
gone that
It,
next step further.
now, the thing is, that's actually one of the few authentic things that JD Vance has actually said. It is okay to tell lies. We want lies. Literally become if you follow this trend, this begins with this begins with a certain form of television show, the proto reality TV show of the late 1970s, the early 80s, that morphed into things like Oprah Winfrey. And I'm not blaming her. I'm just saying these are all trends to the way that you look at news. Us, we're all of an age. I think Lou's the youngest one in the room, but not by a hell of a lot. But we're all of that age that we remember that when we were growing up, your news shows were a guy in a suit, Chet Huntley, Walter Brinkley, those people behind the desk, suit and tie, and they read the news to you. And that's what they did. They had a certain form of presentation. Nowadays, news is not like that. News is during the debate was a perfect example. We had a number of different shows on here. My wife's a news junkie, same as me, and I was out here in my office. My office is a separate building from the house. I was out here in my office, but I walked in the house to get a cup of coffee, and my wife had CNN on the big screen in the living room, and it was, I counted, it was 14 talking heads all on a line, and none of them were actually listening to the debate. They were just waiting for the other one to stop talking so they could get their piece in. And that's very much true of the news nowadays. News is a group effort. It's an opinion. It's do all together, and that evolved out of these confrontational talk shows, things like Jerry Springer, where it's basically a bunch of really bad, horrible, miserable sons of bitches all screaming and yelling at each other and with tears, and it became that form of entertainment. And we see a hell of a lot of that nowadays, of those kind of confrontational. It's not just the news, but it's also the kind of gratuitous, voyeuristic mentality that a large part of this country has as entertainment. And you see it also in things like the debates. To go back to the question that you asked about the upcoming debates, people are not watching debates to be informed. They're not watching, largely. I say this as a general statement. Don't write me, please. But please. But people are watching this for entertainment. We didn't want. We knew that Trump was going to be batshit crazy, and that Kamala Harris was going to have policies, and she was a prosecutor. She'd be able to she'd handle all kind of goofy bastards like Trump all the time. She's professional. She's done this all her whole life, and so we knew how that debate was going to go, and there was no surprises in there. And it's hilarious to me that you have people like Trump and Republicans saying, "Oh my God, they must have given her the questions." What are you talking about? The single question. If they had asked them, "Hey, who's your favorite Star Wars character?" that would have been a surprise, okay? But not a single question that was asked during that debate was in any way something that professionals shouldn't have been able to anticipate. I could have done it, and did do it. And so the fact that we all knew what was going to happen, and yet we watched it anyway. And we watched it anyway because we wanted to see Trump be unhinged. This is the mentality of America nowadays. This reality TV. That's why Trump is famous in the first place. He wouldn't even have been president if he hadn't been a reality TV star, because that's why people watched him. He's a fucking lunatic. That was the whole point. They wanted to fight. They wanted Omarosa screaming in the background. They wanted that noise. That's the kind of mean, miserable, juvenile entertainment that we go for nowadays. Nobody's watching the debate tomorrow night to be informed. You know who is, you know who Tim Walz is, but we're going to watch it anyway not because we want to watch Tim Walz, the father figure of reason and ration, who has the answers, who always has a set of jumper cables in his car and can give you a dozen recipes for hot dishes, and who is always there with advice. The guy that you want running the country, right? You want that guy. We're not watching it. We know that J.D. Vance is going to make all kind of bizarre, off-the-wall, insane, misogynistic, homophobic, xenophobic comments, and that's what the news is going to be the next morning. And again, we brought this on ourselves, and it's a trend that has happened for the last 40 years. And my wife and I were just discussing this here earlier. I think yesterday was. I really think if you watch the Republican Party, and since since Lee Atwater's Southern Strategy brought a lot of these unhinged fringe characters in from the edge, in from the darkness into the light, and made some of this mainstream. There's always been like this crazy edge to the Republican Party since Reagan, but there were also sane, rational actors. Now, I didn't care much for John McCain, the man, or the politician, but at least he was a reasonable, sane who could back up his positions, that sort of thing. But then that guy brought Sarah Palin into the center light. And this woman, and I know Palin, I've met her. I mean, I don't know her personally, never had dinner at her house, thank God. But I met her. When I was in uniform and I was stationed in Alaska, I actually went to a luncheon in Wasilla when she was the mayor. She called me a hero, yada, yada, yada. And then a year or so later, I was retired and a writer, and she called me an enemy of America. So I got the whole Sarah Palin. Experience, and but the woman was a fucking lunatic. She's a nut. She's stupid. That's the biggest problem with Sarah Palin. That she's dumb, and yet what happened is when she said these incredibly ignorant and uninformed and stupid things, there was this chunk of America that said, Colin, you've been telling me I'm stupid, but look at her. She's going to be the vice president of the United States of America. If she's stupid, then if I'm stupid, she must be stupid, and she's obviously not stupid, right? Because otherwise, why would she be vice president of America? And you very much, and then you saw things. You saw the Tea Party. You saw people at rallies out on the street wearing hats with tea bags hanging out. You saw grandmothers talking about getting tea. I'm teabagged. I'm like, can you hear the words come out? And dumber and dumber and dumber as we went along. And this didn't go away. It laid the groundwork for something even dumber and louder and more ignorant. And here we are today where there are no rational actors left in the Republican Party. It is all of these people who, these are the folks that in any meeting, in any business, anywhere, or the military, wherever the hell you're at, there are sane, rational people that are getting the job done. And there's always that one ass clown in the corner who waits till everybody's done and says, not to be the devil's advocate, but, and decent leader turns around and says, Larry, shut up. We've already made the decision. We're moving on. Unfortunately, the Republican Party has become all Larry. They're that guy, and no one's telling them to be quiet. In a rational civilization, when people the nonsense that Donald Trump says, someone would tell them to shut up and sit the fuck down. Unfortunately, this has become the thing. The richest man in the world is literally on his own social media platform this morning saying things that are just as stupid. And people hail him as a genius. Anyway, sorry. I think I talked for beyond my fair share.
Oh, wow.
But now we dead air? Come on, Bob. Let's go.
I'm sorry. I was just following on to everything you said, and it's just so scary.
You were surfing the internet. You weren't even paying attention.
Okay. Well, hey, as we are coming in towards the end of this, I want to remind all of you that within about a week, Southern Truths is going to come out for release. And in that, we have got, pronounce that story again for me, Jim.
It's like antipodes, and that's how a lot of people pronounce it, but it's antipodes.
Well, that's how I pronounce it, but it seemed wrong.
It means the opposites. Maybe that's what I should have called it.
It's brilliant.
It's a word. You know where that title came from? It actually came from way back, years, golden age of science fiction. Those stories often use antipodes to it was a word that was used very commonly not commonly, but it was used in kind of highbrow sci-fi in the 50s and the 40s and the 50s to designate things that were on the far side of the earth. And so you commonly saw that term used when when science fiction writers in the 50s envisioned a day when rockets would carry you from one side of the planet to the other. And you saw it very commonly in the Robert Heinlein's writing, for example. And so that word's always been like kind of glued in my head. And so I finally found a place to use it. And there it is. So, yeah, it's movie. And as Lou just said online there. And what did Michelle say? We love your rants, Jim. Yeah, well, yeah, but you're crazy, Michelle, and you know that.
Well, all I know
Michelle's a longtime follower of mine, and she and I interact quite a bit online. She makes so.
It will be on the shelves inside of during the next 2 weeks. Karen Anderson has designed a brilliant cover, and we saw that. Oh God, Alan Dien, he has written us. It was a funny thing. He wrote us such good stories. He had 3 of them that we wanted to buy for the volume. We finally settled for 2. And
hey, it's better to have got a lot of great story submissions than none. So,
Yep.
Well, it's just been a great fun putting it together because when we read your Antipodes story, it actually set the pace for this book. Because what can you say about the South?
Quite a bit, actually, and certain people, certain writers, a lot of Southern writers who made a career of saying things about the South. I'm not a Southerner; I'm a Yankee. So, and I'm not even that anymore. I mean, I grew up in the North many years ago, but I'd spent all my life in the military, so I've lived all over the planet. And again, I don't have any particular issue with the South. I spent all day yesterday at the Pensacola Seafood Festival. It's a real awesome, amazing chunk of Southern Pensacola, Northern Florida culture, and it's a lot of fun. And if you get a chance to go there, you absolutely should. But I also am someone who looks at that goddamn Confederate flag that's flying in my neighbor's house over here, and looks at things like that museum I mentioned to you earlier with the black and the white waiting rooms and those sorts of things, and those, those are the kind of things. So the things that I see around me every day here, where people talk about their culture, and that's why they support people like Donald Trump. And in fact, I asked that online this morning. In fact, I think that's the last post that I did on Threads about 3 hours ago of what culture, because that's what Donald Trump was talking about this morning. Trump said, no, he didn't say this morning. He actually said this a couple of days ago, but he said, you got to get these people back where they came from. And he's talking about immigrants, in particular, the Haitian immigrants. You have no choice. You're going to lose your culture. That's what he said. I wonder if, 500 years ago, there wasn't the Donald Trump version of Native Americans saying the same thing, but only having a legitimate reason to say it. But again, my question is, you're going to lose your culture.
I think that was King Philip.
It's America. What culture are you talking about? And what culture? What is the American culture? Usually, it's the culture in New York, the same as the culture in Los Angeles, the same as the culture in some goddamn cow field in Nebraska. I mean, what the hell are we talking about here? When you say you're going to lose your culture, what culture are you talking about? Hardee's and Walmart. I mean, come on, man. Name for me the culture.
Well, I tell you, when you read the forward,
because American culture is nothing but 500 years of new people showing up and adding things to our culture. Our culture is a Frankensteinian monster of patchwork parts that have been grafted on from everybody else's culture. And that's the part. The funny thing is that when people begin to name the parts that they like about America, it's all of those things. It's all of things that came from other that literally are the parts that Americans actually regard as their own culture, the part that they actually like and admire. And so when you say you're going to lose your culture, what the hell are you talking about? I mean, what? And the funny thing about it is, of course, is that these are the same people that were invited to come here. Their children go to our schools, which is how you Americanize people, the next generation. They're growing up watching the same TV shows as your little white children that have been born here for 5 generations. They play the same video games. They listen to the same music. They eat the same food. I mean, isn't that what you said you wanted? And so, how are they stealing our culture? What the hell are you talking about? Lou said they're eating our dogs, they're eating our cats. Come on, man, what the hell? It gets to the point you look at it and say, my God, this is insane. That's ridiculous. Except 70 million Americans look at it and say, well, they could be eating the dogs. What the hell, man? I don't know.
I had
We're
a
about out
braised
of
poodle
time.
the other day. I had a braised poodle the other day with a delicate garlic wine butter sauce. It was delicious.
Yeah, the worst part about it is it's the same. It's the same racism. It's the same. It's the same God. They're not even original in their racism. It's the same racism. This is the same thing that they said about Asian immigrants when I was growing up. It's the same. It's the same. Again, I mean, for God's sake, at least be original. You know what I'm saying? How did anybody could buy into this nonsense? Haitians don't eat dogs and cats in our own country. The hell are you talking about? Have you ever been to Haiti? I have. The food's great. The hell are you talking about? It doesn't even make any sense. And I know, again, I see these people and they talk about, well, I mean, it does make sense. It makes sense in the context of racism, which is the same argument that these people have. We want Christians to come here. Well, people coming across the southern border couldn't get more Christian. I mean, have you been to Mexico? And they said, well, yeah, but that's not the right kind of Christian. Well, what do you mean by that? Because they're the same kind of Christian you are. Well, yeah, but they're the brown kind of Christian, and that's why you wouldn't have had someone would have said it out loud, depending on where you're at, but it wouldn't have been on mainstream television. You wouldn't have had a vice presidential candidate saying it out loud, and you do nowadays, and that's what's changed. Now, this stuff, we have to win, and we have to win hard. We can't. It's not enough for Kamala Harris to be president. The House and the Senate have got to be won by enough margin that we can push from the edge of this insanity, of this Reagan Palin lunacy, and push these people back into the fringe where they belong, and restore America to sanity. The problem is that throughout history, far too many times you reach this point, this crux, this moment, and it doesn't happen. You don't push people back, and then inevitably what you wind up with is the Soviet Union. You wind up with fascist Nazi Germany. You wind up with fascist Italy. You wind up with Pol Pot. The history is littered for thousands of years with what happens when you don't turn away at this moment in time. But it doesn't have to go that way. And the United States is an example of that. We've been at this point several times throughout our history. It doesn't have to. We can push these people back into the shadows where they belong. We can build a better future, but it requires that you show the hell up. I see a hell of a lot of people that think that they have what it takes, not only what it takes, but that it's actually desirable for them to take up arms and to kill other people in the idea, in the support of their ideology. Well, I've been to war, and I will tell you that if you have the choice of changing the future through showing up one day and voting, or spending the next 4 years slaughtering your fellows, you very much prefer the voting part, which is how our country was designed, than than to be in the middle of a war. Because I've been in the middle of a couple of years, 30 years, you don't want it. You think you do, but you don't. It's not like you do. I think is that the end of the podcast alarm we got going on over there? Is that what that is?
Yeah.
Hey, I did want to throw one thing in. One of our writers, may he forgive us for the wine jokes and the grandchildren jokes things, who isn't with us this morning, would win the award for the best title of any anthology. No, Karen, I will not let JD eat my puppies. Uh, best title of any story we've ever published, and that is David Gerrold has is sold us a story, the title of which is The Trouble with Dribbles.
When I was reading through the draft of the book, I could barely get it because, God damn it, David.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you know how hard it was not to put that first in the anthology, but I want people to read some really great stories so their appetites are honed for it.
Yeah, Dale. He said dribbles. That's exactly what he said. David, of course, is famous for writing the original Star Trek episode, "The Trouble with Tribbles." Story called "The Trouble with Dribbles."
Yes.
You'll have to read. Buy the book. You'll have to read it.
Yeah.
David.
Well, and I tell you, there's Adam Troy Castro has rocked our world with this. We've talked a little bit about how Jim's done it. We've got I mean, this book has got the best stories I have published at BQ Press in a while. It is just awesome, the talent that has assembled itself at my doorstep, thanks to Karen KG Anderson. Karen has edited wonderfully. She is a great editor to work with, and fortunately, she has helped me overwhelm my my poorer instincts. So thank you, Karen, and thank you, Alan, Jen Shapiro. You, like I say, and all the other folks that are in this anthology, including you, Jim. Because I mean, I had to read your story multiple times to just totally dig out all of the things that are in there. And having grown up in a little town called Gatesville, Texas, I could find chunks of your story all through it, or chunks of Gatesville buried in your story. You hit the South on the head with that. But Lou, what do you got to say before we close out?
Thank you for letting me, very humble member of your typical chat audience, rise to the point where I got to actually say stuff and be on video. It was an honor being here with both of you all.
Oh, hey, you have no idea what an honor is. Usually when you're on with Jim and David, you don't get to say stuff.
That's right.
You might need higher standards, Lou.
I don't think so, Jim. I've read everything you write, and I love your mind. I feel like we could be brothers. We could be brothers.
Yeah.
You guys you guys all rock, and so I'm gonna say wave goodbye. And Jim, do you have any closing comments other than
you know me, I always got something. But again, at this point, I'm actually running out of things to say at this point. And I don't mean at this point in the podcast. I mean at this point in time. I've said it over and over and over again, and it's astounding to me how many people don't listen. And it's not just me that's saying it. The bottom line is, you got to show up. You got to show up. You got to do your duty as a citizen. You have to do it in such numbers that, and I don't want to say we win, it's that America wins, the future wins, our children win, and that there is a new generation of rational, sane people that you might not necessarily agree with, but you can at least respect running the damn country. And that's on you. It's a republic we live in, but it's based on democracy, and that makes you the fundamental component of this civilization. And you got to do it. You got to show up. And I say this, but I will be surprised if more than 52% of registered voters or eligible voters actually show up. And I say this to young people, and there's probably not a hell of a lot of young people watching this podcast, but young people don't vote. They don't matter. If you only vote one time in your entire life, this is the election, because this will determine the future, the world that you live in. I don't know how much longer I'm going to live. Odds are not long. But we're leaving the world to my son and my daughter-in-law and my grandchildren. And I want those people to have the advantages I had, the rights that I had, not less, more. And we have well within our power as a people to build a better civilization for every single person on this planet. That's within your power, but you have to show up. There's nothing more important on that day. You got to be there, even if you crawl through broken glass. And I know I say that at the end of every podcast, but God damn it, it hasn't changed. You have to show up. And I get to the point now where I feel like I'm pissing into the wind. I don't write a hell of a lot anymore, simply because it feels like wasted motion. But for God's sake, if you hear nothing else from me, hear that. Show up. Do your duty as a citizen. Build a better future.
Thank you, Jim. And that's it. Thanks, guys. All y'all folks out there who tuned in, and especially the folks that are here. And thank you, Karen, and all the other people involved in Southern Truths. So later.
All right.